The forest was alive with whispers of wind weaving through tall pines, their shadows stretching across the moss. Daniel walked cautiously, his boots sinking into damp earth as curiosity drove him deeper. The air carried the faint scent of old smoke, as though a fire had once burned where no one had lived for years. He muttered, "There has to be something out here," clutching his worn notebook, its pages filled with scribbles of rumors about vanished researchers. A bird startled overhead, and his pulse quickened. Clara's voice echoed in his memory. Warning: leave it buried, Daniel. Some truths aren't meant to be found. But silence pressed heavy on him now, save for the crackle of leaves beneath each step. Suddenly, he saw markings etched into bark. Strange geometric symbols glowing faintly as the light shifted. He leaned closer, heart hammering, whispering, "Someone wanted this hidden." The deeper he went, the denser the mist grew, curling around his legs like restless spirits. A metallic glint appeared under the roots of an ancient oak. Kneeling, Daniel brushed away dirt and found a rusted file case, water damaged but sealed tight. He whispered, trembling, "This is it, the beginning." He glanced around nervously, the trees bending as though listening. The forest held its breath, and for the first time Daniel wondered if he was truly alone. Daniel pushed forward into the woods, every step heavier with the burden of discovery. The forest seemed endless, yet something guided him, unseen but insistent. He whispered, "What am I walking into?" A trail of scattered tools lay half buried under damp soil, rusted wrenches, broken goggles, a lantern with glass cracked like old bone. His pulse raced as he realized someone had left in haste, abandoning not just objects but stories. The silence of the forest deepened, broken only by distant crows. He lifted the lantern, whispering, "They left in fear." A tree nearby bore claw-like scratches, raw against the bark. The forest seemed to close in tighter. He shivered, glancing back at the path he had taken, but it had already dissolved into mist. His thoughts tangled, Clara's warning echoing stronger now. Some doors, once opened, will never close. Yet he pressed on, unable to turn back. The trees grew darker, thicker, the air colder, and every sound amplified until his own heartbeat thundered. He stumbled upon an overturned crate. Inside, damp papers, rotting but still marked with faded stamps of a government seal. His voice broke in awe. This was official. They were hiding something. The weight of the discovery pressed on him, and still he stepped further into shadow. The forest thinned for a moment, revealing a narrow ridge where Daniel paused to catch his breath. Ahead, Clara waited, arms folded tight, her eyes sharp with unease. She said, "You shouldn't be here, Daniel. Not everything buried deserves light." Her voice carried the weight of fear and memory. Daniel answered, "You don't understand. This is bigger than us. The truth is waiting." Clara shook her head, her steps hesitant as if part of her wanted to flee. Mist curled between them, obscuring half her form, as if the forest itself wished to pull her away. The ridge crumbled slightly under Daniel's boot, scattering pebbles into the void below. A raven circled overhead, cawing, its voice sharp against the silence. Clara's face softened, her tone quiet. "If you keep going, there may be no way back." Daniel's gaze burned with obsession, his jaw set. He whispered more to himself than to her. "I was meant to find this." And with that, he stepped past her, into the narrowing path that vanished into shadows, his resolve unbroken, though fear gnawed quietly at him. Deeper in the forest, Daniel stumbled upon torn scraps scattered among roots half buried in mud. He pulled one free, its ink blurred by water, but the fragments were legible enough to suggest research log. The words spoke of subjects, experiments, and failures. His hands shook as he read aloud. Project discontinued due to unforeseen consequences. The phrase cut into him like glass. Clara's absence pressed on him, leaving the air heavier. The forest groaned, branches creaking overhead as if alive. The paper reeked of mildew and fear, its edges brittle and sharp. His stomach turned, yet he stuffed the fragments into his jacket, whispering, "I can't let this vanish." Suddenly, footsteps echoed faintly behind him, too deliberate to be chance. He froze, turning, but the mist swallowed everything. A silence hung thick. He murmured, "Someone's watching." Fear burned, but so did determination. He gripped the scraps tighter, every instinct screaming that the forest was no longer empty. Night fell swiftly, and the forest transformed under the pale silver of the moon. Daniel built a small fire near a hollow tree, its glow barely fighting the shadows. He studied the damp files, his eyes straining. The air was too still. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the firelight, half shrouded in cloak and shadow. Daniel stiffened, his voice unsteady. "Who's there?" The figure stepped closer, revealing sharp eyes that gleamed like mirrors in the dark. It was someone he did not know, yet they spoke as though they had been waiting. The stranger said softly, "The forest keeps secrets, but not all are meant for you." Daniel's jaw clenched, anger mixing with fear. "Tell me what you know," he demanded. The stranger tilted their head, smirking faintly before vanishing back into the mist, leaving only silence. The fire flickered violently, as though disturbed by unseen breath. Daniel stared into the darkness, pulse hammering, realization dawning. He was not searching alone anymore. Something or someone was watching every step he took. Daniel spent the morning scouring old town records at a dusty municipal hall. The building smelled of mold, and stacks of forgotten files reached the ceiling. He muttered, "There has to be something left." His eyes darted through brittle pages, names, dates, disappearances recorded but unexplained. Each entry tied back to the forest. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, exhaustion pressing on him. A clerk passed by, shaking their head with pity, whispering, "That place took too many." Daniel ignored the remark, pushing deeper into archives where no one bothered to look. He pulled out a folder stamped with red ink, the edges eaten by moisture. The words leapt out: experimental site, relocation, containment. His hands trembled, whispering. They tried to erase it. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him, deliberate and slow. He spun, but the corridor stretched empty. His pulse hammered. Closing the folder, he tucked it under his arm. Leaving the hall, Daniel felt the weight of unseen eyes following him, as if the truth had already noticed his intrusion. The trail led Daniel back to the forest, where an abandoned cabin leaned with age and decay. Windows shattered, roof sagging. The place felt untouched yet alive. He whispered, "This is it." Inside, the air was damp, dust motes drifting like ghosts. The floor groaned as he stepped, beams threatening collapse. Against a wall, he saw a hatch, half buried in debris. Kneeling, he pulled away boards, revealing a rusted handle. "Someone didn't want this found," he said through clenched teeth. Forcing it open, a cold draft rushed upward, the smell of earth and metal heavy. He shined his lantern, a staircase winding down into darkness. His breath shook as he whispered, "A hidden passage." The cabin creaked loudly as if protesting. He hesitated at the threshold, but the hunger for answers gnawed deeper. Adjusting his pack, Daniel stepped cautiously onto the first stair. The hatch groaning shut above him, leaving only the hum of unseen machinery far below. Daniel's descent was interrupted by a voice calling faintly behind him. He froze, lantern shaking. From the shadows emerged Elias, a gaunt figure with sorrow etched deep in his face. Elias said, "You shouldn't be here." His tone was weary, carrying grief more than warning. Daniel steadied his breath. "You know what's down there?" Elias's eyes clouded, his hands trembling as if holding invisible weight. I lost someone. The lab took them. I thought it was just research, but it wasn't. It was cruelty dressed as science. Daniel's heart thudded, realizing Elias' tragedy was tied to this place. Then help me stop it, Daniel urged. Elias shook his head, his voice breaking. I don't know if the truth saves anyone, but it destroys those who chase it. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching around them. Elias stepped back into the mist, but his pain lingered like a wound cut open in silence. Night cloaked the forest as Daniel camped at the passage entrance, unable to push further. The silence was fractured by distant metallic echoes, as if machines still hummed underground. He shivered, staring into the dark opening. The trees whispered as wind passed, but the sound twisted into voices. He muttered, "This place remembers." Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. He spun with lantern raised, heart pounding. The forest grew restless, leaves shaking though no storm moved. Each sound came sharper, amplified. He whispered to steady himself, "I'm not leaving." A heavy thud echoed below the hatch, deep and resonant, sending vibrations into the soil. Daniel knelt, pressing his hand to the ground. The earth trembled faintly. Fear surged, but so did resolve. "You're still alive down there," he muttered. His words were swallowed by the growing wind, the forest howling like it too wished to warn him away. The next day, Daniel returned to town only to be stopped by Marcus, a man with calm authority cloaked in menace. Marcus said, "You've been asking too many questions." Daniel stiffened, clutching his satchel. Marcus's tone sharpened. "Some places are closed for good reason." His gaze was unwavering, his presence commanding. Daniel answered firmly, "You can't bury the truth forever." Marcus smirked, voice low. "The truth doesn't belong to you. Walk away before it consumes you." Daniel's hands clenched, but his silence spoke volumes. Marcus leaned close, whispering, "Curiosity has a price. You won't like what it takes." With that, he turned and vanished into the crowded street, leaving Daniel alone with the echo of his threat. Fear gnawed at Daniel, but beneath it burned defiance stronger than before. He whispered to himself, "I'm closer than they want me to be." The game of shadows had begun. Daniel trekked back into the woods where the ground was wet with last night's rain. His boots sank into mud as he followed faint tracks. Something glimmered ahead under a half-collapsed tarp. Pulling it free, he uncovered water-damaged folders, their ink bleeding but legible. Words like test subjects and hazard protocols chilled him. He whispered, "This isn't just research. This is something else." The damp pages crackled, fragile as bone. A sudden gust lifted loose papers, scattering them across the clearing. He scrambled to gather them, but one page drifted far, caught in branches. Chasing it, he tripped over buried metal, something unnatural in the soil. The ground hummed faintly under his touch. "What are you hiding?" he muttered, pulse racing. The forest around him hushed, as though holding its breath, waiting for what he would uncover next. Daniel carried fragments back to town where Clara intercepted him at the edge of the square. Her arms crossed, eyes heavy with worry. "You look haunted," she said. Daniel replied, "I found proof. Files, records. This was real." Clara's jaw tightened. "And now you've painted a target on your back." Daniel's voice sharpened. "If they buried people with lies, we can't let it stay hidden." Clara's gaze softened, fear breaking into reluctant resolve. She sighed, whispering, "Then you'll need me, whether I like it or not." For the first time, her defiance faltered, replaced by determination. Daniel nodded, the weight of shared risk heavy. Around them, the square bustled, yet it felt as if shadows stalked between faces, watching every word, exchanged. Returning to the woods together, Daniel and Clara followed the trail back to the buried object. He scraped at the soil, revealing a device of metal and glass, humming faintly despite age. Clara whispered, "That's not natural." Daniel's eyes locked on its surface, wires exposed, strange symbols etched along its frame. He said, "It's still alive." The hum deepened as though sensing their presence. Clara stepped back nervously, muttering, "This feels wrong." Daniel reached out, fingertips brushing the surface. The air around them vibrated, the forest echoing like a tuning fork. Fear and wonder tangled in Clara's face, but Daniel's obsession only sharpened. He whispered, "This was never meant to stay buried." Later that night, a figure appeared from the fog as Daniel and Clara packed their things. It was Adrian, offering guidance but with eyes too eager. "I know the way to what you seek," he said smoothly. Clara whispered, "Why help us?" Adrian smiled thinly, "Because the truth wants to be found." Daniel studied him, suspicion burning. Something about Adrian's timing felt rehearsed, too polished. But his words dangled like bait. Claire pulled Daniel aside, whispering urgently, "He's not telling us everything." Daniel's jaw tightened, but obsession overpowered caution. He said, "We follow him, for now." Adrian's smile lingered, shadows clinging to his face as if the mist itself conspired with him. The following day, Adrian led them deeper into the forest, stopping at a locked iron box half buried in roots. He gestured casually, "Open it, and you'll see the truth." Daniel knelt, fingers trembling as he pried at the lid. Clara whispered, "Something's wrong." The air thickened, unnatural cold seeping from the ground. The lock snapped with sudden ease, revealing documents sealed in plastic, pristine despite years underground. Daniel's breath caught as he read. Subject terminations, containment breach, relocation failed. His hands shook, realization burning. Clara's voice quivered. "They weren't just hiding files, they were hiding bodies." Adrian's smirk deepened, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction, as though leading them here had been part of his plan all along. Daniel sat in the old library, its silence broken only by the creak of old wood. Dust floated in narrow beams of light that cut through cracked windows. He searched the archives, hands trembling as he uncovered brittle newspapers bound in twine. Headlines screamed of missing townsfolk spanning decades, each linked to the same wooded region. He whispered, "They erased them from memory." Clara leaned over his shoulder, her voice low with disbelief. "No one ever asked why they vanished." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because someone told them not to." He turned another page, a grainy photograph revealing blurred faces outside the cabin ruins. Elias's name appeared in the text, linked to a report filed and ignored. Daniel exhaled sharply, realizing the forest's tragedies were not isolated accidents. Clara's hand rested briefly on his arm, her voice trembling. This was planned. Daniel's eyes narrowed, fury building, and covered up. The truth was no longer whispers. It was printed ink, proof carved into history. The mist returned thicker that night when the mysterious outsider appeared once more. He stood at the tree line, eyes sharp, cloaked in tattered gray. Daniel froze, lantern light flickering across the man's gaunt features. The stranger said, "You search for answers, but answers tear more than they heal." Daniel's fists clenched. "Then why keep following me?" The outsider smirked faintly, stepping closer, shadows swallowing him with each stride. "Because I know where you'll end up, and you'll hate what you see." Clara whispered, "Don't listen. He feeds on doubt." But Daniel couldn't look away, caught between suspicion and need. The outsider lowered his voice. "They built doors in that place that should never open." His words clung like chains. Before Daniel could ask more, the man vanished into fog, as if he had never been there. Clara gripped Daniel's sleeve hard. "He wants you afraid," Daniel muttered. I'm already there. The following day, Daniel confronted Marcus in the town square. People bustled around them, but the tension between the two silenced the noise. Daniel held out the files had found. Voice sharp. You knew all along. Marcus's expression didn't flinch, his calm a mask. You think truth saves anyone? It unravels everything. Daniel's voice cut deeper. You let people vanish and called it silence. Marcus stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I preserved order. What you're chasing is chaos dressed as revelation. Clara pulled Daniel back, her eyes darting to watching townsfolk. Their whispers stirred unease. Daniel refused to yield, growling. Order built on lies is collapse. Marcus' smile was thin, dangerous. You're playing a game you cannot win. The crowd shifted, unsure whether to step closer or retreat. For Daniel, the line between truth and survival thinned to a blade's edge. Back in the cabin ruins, Daniel and Clara discovered a bundle of blueprints hidden beneath floorboards. The diagrams stretched across yellowed parchment, depicting chambers and devices that defied reason. Clara's eyes widened. These aren't just labs, they're machines. Daniel's fingers traced symbols etched on the corners, his voice heavy. Technology decades ahead of its time. Impossible for then. The blueprints showed conduits branching like veins, leading into chambers marked for testing. A chill ran through them as they realized what these structures implied. Clara muttered, this wasn't science. It was cruelty. Daniel's jaw clenched, whispering, and someone perfected it. The weight of the revelation pressed on them as the forest creaked above, like the world itself protested their discovery. Night fell when betrayal cracked open the fragile trust. Adrian stood by the fire with Daniel and Clara, his voice smooth but cutting. I never promised loyalty. I promised knowledge. Clara's eyes widened, betrayal twisting her face. You led us into this. Adrian smirked, stepping back into shadows. You needed me to find what you shouldn't have. Daniel lunged forward, fury shaking him. You've been feeding them our steps. Adrian's grin widened. And you followed willingly. The firelight cast his face in jagged shadows, revealing his duplicity. Clara whispered, broken, we trusted you. Adrian vanished into the trees, his footsteps merging with the night. Silence followed, heavier than before. Daniel's fist shook as the fire crackled, his obsession now tainted by betrayal's sting. At dawn, Daniel led Clara into the depths of the hidden passage. The air thickened as the stairwell gave way to an underground corridor lined with concrete walls, water dripping steadily. Their lantern flickered across rusted doors, each marked with strange codes. Clara whispered, this feels like a tomb. Daniel touched the walls, whispering, it's a graveyard of secrets. The corridor stretched endlessly, silence broken by their breaths. Faint machinery hummed somewhere ahead, too steady to be dead. Daniel's pulse quickened. This place is still alive. His words echoed like a curse. Clara's eyes widened, fear gripping her, but she followed. The tunnel turned sharply into a vast chamber, ceiling lost in shadows. Crates and broken consoles lay scattered, wires trailing like veins. Daniel's voice dropped. We've stepped inside their design. They entered a smaller chamber lined with shattered glass pods. Metal frames stood cracked, wires spilling like entrails. Clara covered her mouth, whispering, they held people here. Daniel's face hardened, rage burning through fear. Subjects. They called them subjects. On one console lay fragments of files, their words burned but not law. He read aloud, failure to adapt. Containment breach. His voice broke, realization crashing. Clara shook her head. tears welling. They experimented on them like animals. Daniel clenched his fists, whispering, "This wasn't science. This was slaughter." The silence afterward was unbearable, filled with the weight of ghosts who could not speak. As they pressed deeper, Clara's resistance began to falter. She leaned on a wall, whispering, "I can't deny it anymore. Everything you said, it's true." Daniel's eyes softened for a fleeting moment. "And it's worse than I imagined." Clara steadied herself, wiping her face. "Then we finish this together." Her fear shifted into resolve. Daniel gave a short nod, his obsession tempered briefly by the strength of her choice. Together they stepped into the next corridor. The hum of unseen machines louder now, as if waiting for them. Suddenly the lights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. Sparks snapped from a console, and Daniel cursed under his breath. The device they carried for recording shattered suddenly, its pieces scattering across the floor. Clara shouted, "Someone sabotaged this." Daniel's jaw set. Adrian. His betrayal still burned fresh. A faint sound echoed, boots scraping against metal far down the hall. Daniel whispered, "He's here." Their breaths froze, the tunnel alive with unseen presence. Clara's voice cracked, "He'll kill us before we find the truth." Daniel steadied her, whispering, "Then we move faster." The shadows stretched, and the hunt began. At last they reached a final chamber, its walls lined with filing cabinets and sealed containers. Daniel pulled one open, revealing rows of photographs, faces of missing townsfolk, their names scrawled below. Clara's breath hitched, her hands trembling. "They're all here." Daniel flipped through pages of medical logs, experiments catalogued with chilling precision. He whispered, "They weren't lost. They were taken." Clara's tears fell freely, horror and grief overwhelming. The room felt like a mausoleum of truth. Daniel's voice hardened into steel. "This ends with us." As the chamber lights flickered overhead, their mission shifted from discovery to justice, no matter the cost. The chamber deep below shook with a subtle vibration as Daniel opened another drawer. Inside lay files sealed in wax envelopes, the inked warning stark. Restricted. Unauthorized access punishable. Clara whispered, "They wanted this gone forever." Daniel's breath quickened, tearing one open. The pages revealed schematics of devices capable of altering perception, machines built to test human threshold. His hand trembled as he read words like sensory reconfiguration and irreversible trauma. He muttered, "This was never medicine, it was manipulation." Clara's eyes darted across the walls lined with cabinets, her voice trembling. How many people did they break to feed this obsession? Daniel's face hardened, fire in his eyes. Too many. The hum of machinery under their feet deepened, as if the forest itself pulsed with their discovery. From the shadows, Elias stepped forward, his face pale with grief. His voice cracked. "I never told you everything. My brother, he was one of them." Daniel froze, disbelief washing over him. Elias's hands shook as he pulled out a torn photograph, showing a man strapped to a machine, wires crossing his skin. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Elias whispered, "He went into the woods one night, and they never let him return. When I found him, he was gone, hollow, only his body remained." Daniel clenched the photo, whispering, "This place devoured him." Elias nodded with tears brimming, "And now it will devour you too if you don't stop." The weight of his confession pressed heavily, his tragedy tying itself to theirs in silence. They returned to the surface only to be met by Marcus standing with officers, his voice smooth yet cold. "You trespassed where you don't belong." Daniel clutched the satchel of files tighter. Clara stepped forward. "These people deserve the truth." Marcus's gaze sharpened, his words calm. The truth will drown you. I'll make sure it never leaves those walls. Daniel's voice rose, fury boiling. Then you'll have to silence me yourself. Marcus's smile was deliberate, his command ringing out, "Take them." Shadows of uniforms closed in, the weight of power tilting against them. For the first time, Clara's voice cracked in defiance. "You won't bury us." The confrontation teetered between revelation and ruin, danger closing fast. Later that night, betrayal tore through what little trust remained. Adrian revealed himself fully, his smirk venomous. "Did you think I guided you out of kindness?" Daniel's fists clenched, voice raw. "You led us into their hands." Clara's face twisted with pain. "We believed you." Adrian's eyes gleamed in firelight. "Belief is the easiest trap." "I gave them everything you touched." Daniel lunged, but Adrian slipped into the shadows with calculated ease. His last words cut sharp. "You'll choke on the very truth you chase." Silence fell heavy as Daniel stood shaking, Clara's tears glistening. Betrayal had left a wound deeper than the files, deeper than the forest itself. In the underground chamber once more, Daniel and Clara raced to gather what they could. Suddenly, a violent crash echoed and flames sparked from the cabinets. Someone had set fire to the evidence. Clara screamed, "They're destroying it!" Daniel grabbed handfuls of files, coughing through smoke. His voice cracked. "We can't let it vanish." The heat grew unbearable, the air choked with ash. Elias appeared, dragging them toward the exit. "It's collapsing." Daniel's mind reeled as fire consumed decades of secret. Still, clutching a handful of scorched papers, he whispered, "I'll carry what they can't burn." The truth, though scarred, survived within his grip. At dawn, Daniel staggered through the forest clearing, the fire's smoke trailing behind him. The outsider emerged once more, his cloak rippling in the mist. He said, "You've carried the ashes of their sins." Daniel's voice rasped. "Then help me end it." The outsider smirked, eyes hollow. "The end isn't yours to write, but I can open the door you've been chasing." Clara clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "We can't trust him." Daniel's gaze never wavered. "We don't have a choice." The outsider extended a hand, leading them toward the heart of the woods where the ground trembled faintly. Every step forward felt like a march toward revelation or ruin. The outsider guided them to a sealed iron door hidden in earth. Its surface was carved with the same symbols Daniel had seen glowing on trees. Clara whispered, "It's been here the whole time." Daniel pressed his hand against it, the symbols flaring faintly. He muttered, "This is what they were guarding." The outsider's voice cut deep. "Once opened, it cannot be closed." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice steady. "Then it stays open." The door groaned, ancient locks snapping one by one. Darkness poured from within, colder than any night. Clara gripped his sleeve. "Don't let it take you too." But Daniel stepped through, consumed by both fear and hunger for truth. Inside, they found the remnants of a vast chamber filled with shattered pods and broken consoles. In the center lay a table draped in dust, and on it, a photograph of a young woman. Clara froze, tears streaming as she whispered, "She's one of the missing." Daniel picked it up, realization dawning. She's the victim. The reason they built this place. Folders scattered across the ground confirmed years of suffering. People reduced to numbers. Clara's voice cracked. Her story was buried so deep, but she was the key. Daniel's chest tightened as the magnitude of the tragedy enveloped them. They had found the heart of the horror. Marcus appeared from the shadows, his voice echoing like steel. "You should have stayed blind." Daniel clenched his fists. "You built this nightmare." Marcus' expression hardened. I preserved what was necessary, Clara shouted, at the cost of lives. Marcus drew closer, fury masking his control. You think exposing this will save you? It will destroy everything. Daniel stood firm, eyes burning. Better destruction than silence. The chamber quaked, dust raining down. Marcus lunged, the clash erupting not with weapons, but with truth thrown like blades. For Daniel, this was the confrontation his obsession had summoned all along. The chamber collapsed as Daniel dragged Clara out, Marcus's shouts fading into the rubble. Above ground, the forest trembled, roots tearing as if rejecting the buried sins. Daniel clutched the surviving files, his voice raw. It's over. But it cost everything. Clara leaned against him, tears streaking her ash-stained face. What will you do now? Daniel stared into the rising sun, exhaustion etched into his features. Tell the world, no matter what it takes. The outsider's voice drifted faintly through the mist. Truth never frees. It only chains, Daniel whispered. Then I'll carry the chains. The forest was silent once more. But their lives were forever scarred by the weight of revelation.